start at 3 o'clock.
I've been burning midnight oil trying to watch the last game that were pretty late.
Oh, yeah, it was crazy on Sunday, switching back and forth from the football game to the baseball game. It was whiplash by the end of the night. But they were
Kept you awake.
all good outcomes. I used to go to Houston a lot and have been to that Minnetonka field. We had every spring we had a conference out there. We used to love to go there. Spring is a nice time there. Even so, it could get pretty humid there. What's that?
New Hampshire.
Yeah, it's much better. No, I agree. Yeah. We actually used to have our one big conference was way out there in the Astrodome. And we'd go into Minute Maid Field often. It was a nice ride there. Nice people.
Good evening. I'm Alan Glassman, Sam Rubino, who's working on Eddie's campaign. I mentioned that I'm the vice chair of the New Hampshire Republican State Committee. I do want to point out that before that, I was the chairman of the Belknap County Republican Committee. I live in Barnstead, so I'm local to all of you. I've been here to the Wigwask Range many times, so I see a lot of familiar faces here. I also see some new faces, so that's very good. At any rate, I do want to introduce our candidate here, but before we do that, I would like to call upon Hillary Seeger to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance so that we can get this meeting kicked off. We'll all stand, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, as I'm sure all of you must know, Eddie Edwards is the Republican candidate for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. Eddie he's a U.S. Navy veteran. Okay, you got yours. Eddie is also the former chief of police from Southampton, New Hampshire. He was also the chief of the New Hampshire State Division of Labor Enforcement, and he is also currently a local small business owner here in New Hampshire. So he's got a lot of roots right here in New Hampshire. One thing that I have to tell you about Eddie is this is a man of integrity. He's got principles and he stands by them. He's served in the federal government, the state government, local government. When he's been in the government, he's seen a lot of waste in the government. As many of you may be familiar with, the government tends to get larger and larger and larger over time, and money gets spent more and more and more. Well, Eddie is one of those people who really feels that government needs to be a little bit smaller. There are some things that you can pare off of there. There are some things that are run less efficiently than they should be. So he has stood up against the increases in government and is all for cutting taxes and using our tax money in a wise fashion, appropriately. He's been working in both the private and the public sector now for a number of years, and he's also someone who is strongly in favor of enforcing the criminal justice system, and he's an advocate for veterans, as he is a Navy veteran as well. He served in the U.S. Navy. He's also in favor of supporting early childhood education. He lives in Dover. He's married. His wife Cindy, right in the back over here. Thank you, Cindy, for being here. And they have 2 daughters. And they also have the most important thing, They have a poodle named Zoe, and they also have an English bulldog named Maximus. So they're all two dogs. At any rate, it gives me great pleasure, and it's an honor for me to introduce Eddie Edwards, our candidate. Before you go on, Eddie, I would like to just say that we'll have a little bit of a ground rule here, and that is that certainly there are going to be questions from the floor. Please make sure that your questions are direct and succinct so that we can use the least amount of time for your questions so that Eddie can spend the greatest amount of time answering your questions. So with that, I turn it over to you, Eddie.
Thank you. Thank you again, Alan. And thank all of you for being here. I am here tonight with my wife, and we've been on this journey together since April of 2017. And as you know, when you decide to run for office, you're not running alone. You're running with family and friends and the community. And I've been very blessed to be the Republican nominee for the congressional run. And I just want to give you a little bit of background about myself so I can make this about you and I can answer your questions. As some of you know, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been in New Hampshire about 30 years. I grew up in a pretty challenging home. As a young man, I watched my mother being physically beaten by my father. And I can tell you one of the scars that my mother wears deeply now was the emotional scar she suffered from my father being torn down verbally in front of her sons. That's something that, she's to this day, she's still bothered by that, the way she was spoken to and torn down. But my father was a pretty abusive guy. He also sold drugs, drove truck for a living, but he sold drugs. My older brother now is in prison, 18 to life for murder. This is his second time around. The first time was for attempted murder over a drug deal, went bad, or gambling debt or something like that, and beat a gentleman with a tire iron. And he got out of prison, started robbing drug dealers, got into prostitution, and ultimately was sentenced 18 to life. Now, for me, I had a grandmother, and we had the same grandmother, but I count myself as being very blessed because I had a grandmother who stepped in and said to me, you don't become something, don't blame your father, don't blame this neighborhood, it's your fault, you're a failure, no one else's. And I also count myself as being very blessed that we live in America. Because in America, you may not be born on first base, second base, third base, but we all get a chance at that. So the vast majority of us have come from the dugout. But in this great country, we get a chance to swing. And I had an opportunity to swing it back, and I tried to make something of my life. And what's even more amazing about America, you can strike out the first time at bat, but you can get up and get another swing. That's why I love this country. It's also why I joined the United States Navy, ultimately becoming a law enforcement officer, spending about 25 years of my life in law enforcement, graduated from the National FBI Academy, served as our state's chief administrative alcohol prosecutor, also prosecuted a little bit in district court for criminal cases. So there are a couple of things that are important to me, and I want to get right to your questions. But I believe in transparency, and I believe in restoring power back to our families and our community. I want more families, moms and dads, communities in charge, less government in our lives. And I tell you that because I have seen the abuse and the authority of government, and I want to make sure that New Hampshire always remains New Hampshire. As I said, I came here 30 years ago. When I came to this state, very few people even locked their doors. That was a great thing. That's why one of the reasons I stayed in New Hampshire, because it was such a different place than I grew up. And so now, looking at New Hampshire, I want to make sure we keep the federal government out of our business here in the state. I'm a big advocate of the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment, to me, gives us the right here in New Hampshire to retain most of our money here, have those dollars turned over in our community to benefit the citizens of this state. We're a very responsible state, as you know. And right now, Washington takes an awful lot of money from New Hampshire. We're a donor state, so we give back far less than we give to Washington. That's number one. Number two is term limits. I think we have to have term limits. I know some people are opposed to term limits, but for me, it's the only way to guarantee that you have power back. And I believe as our founders intended, as they debated the term limits early on in our development under the Confederation, Articles of Confederation, 3 two-year terms in the House. I don't believe in building political power, one step up on the ladder, you go from one level to the next level. Pick a seat, run for it, serve your community, and go back home. That's to me is term limits. Thirdly, we have to do something about the medical costs in our country. Right now, 535 members who represent this country we subsidize 70% of their healthcare costs. They claim they're on the ACA, but 70% of their healthcare costs is covered by us. In this state, about 25,000 residents in the state of New Hampshire experienced on average 52% increase in their healthcare costs. That's shameful to me, that we have people in Washington who are doing better than the people they claim they care about. And so one of the things I want to get done in Washington to make sure that we remove healthcare benefits from people in Washington, because I think that will spur some level of urgency to correct this problem. So those are some of the things that broadly that I hope to accomplish, and I'm looking forward to your questions and our conversation tonight. Thank you.
So Eddie, are you ready to take some questions?
I certainly am.
All right, well, the floor is open, so if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and I'll do the best to call on you so that Eddie can give you an answer. Yes, sir. Would you please identify yourself and what town you're from, please?
Yes, sir. My name's Richard DeMark. I live here in Meredith, about a mile away.
Oh, great.
Mr. Edwards, thanks for coming to Meredith.
Thanks for having me. I love it here.
You said that you want to wean future generations off Social Security. At what age do you want to see people off the program for good?
Well, if you listen to the NPR debate that we had, what I was referring to was a program that it remains in Social Security. This is for people who have not started working yet. It's for folks who have not started working, for them to have a personal savings account within the Department of Social Security. So when I talk about Social Security, I want to make sure that the program is solvent. We have seniors who have paid into their Social Security. They should not be threatened that their Social Security is going to be taken from them. We have people near retirement age. They should be assured that Social Security will be there for them. So the best way to do that is look at it, make sure that we make it solvent for current retirees, people nearing retirement, but our future generations, we have to do something to make sure it's there for them as well as the people currently on it. You've heard politicians talk about this year after year after year, and nothing's done about it. So at some point, we have to do something. And that doesn't mean that we're taking people out of the Social Security program. I want to provide those future generations who have not started working yet with greater flexibility. Much like you found with the Medicare Advantage program. So there's some flexibility there for folks who are paying into the system. So we're not actually taking people off Social Security. We're putting them into a way to stabilize themselves, have a safety net for them, but they're still part of the Social Security program.
So when you said wean, you didn't mean remove them from Social Security?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this is one of the things I find very challenging about, I'm not a career politician. I'm not a politician at all. And when you deal with people who are politicians, they look for ways to try to twist words to use those against you. That's why we can't have a conversation in our country anymore, because it's about trust. We have to have an open dialogue. I'm not interested in removing people from Social Security. And in fact, if you listen to my earlier comments, I said what I just said now. That's exactly the way I said it. I didn't explain about the self-saving account within the Department of Social Security. But my opponent, Kappas, understood exactly what I was talking about. And less than 2 minutes after that debate was over, they went out and started putting out things that were completely untrue. Initially, they said I wanted to take seniors off Social Security. I never said that. And so this is what we do to each other in this country. We find ways to tear each other down and develop conflict without really solving problems. And that's why I'm running, because I think people are sick of traditional politicians. They tell you what you want to hear over and over again, and nothing's ever resolved. Nothing. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind standing up, please.
I'm Richard. I'm from Laconia. Could you tell us why term limits are so important for this country to have?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I think if just imagine, if you will, if we didn't have term limits on the presidency. You realize when our country was established, the Constitution was written, the presidency of this country did not have term limits. It wasn't until one president decided to go beyond 8 years and break a tradition started by George Washington that you do 2 4-year terms. He decided to do 12. And the country rejected that and said, no, we're going to put term limits on our president. Now we've gotten to a place that people can't imagine Congress having term limits. Let me ask you, all of you, John Conyers is my best example of this. John Conyers entered Congress, and I don't know if you know who he is, but he's He was a Democrat legislator, I think from Michigan. He entered in 1964. He left in 2017 over a sexual scandal. Over 50 years in Congress. I want to ask you, who's that wonderful? Who's that amazing, talented, wonderful person that they deserve to be in Washington, D.C. for over 50 years crafting laws? No one. No one's that special. And so at the end of the day, I think we have to get back to a place where you feel in charge. How many of you really feel like you're in charge of your fellow government? Most people don't. And Congress is something I find very offensive. In 1946, when they transferred their authority to the administrative branch of government, most of us in this country will never be in a courtroom. Thank God, most of us will never be in a courtroom. Most of us will never speak to an elected official. Not so true here in this state. But most will not. Most people will never meet their mayor, governor, or president. Every single one of us will be impacted by the administrative branch of government. Our children, our grandchildren, our moms and dads, our business folks will all be impacted by the administrative branch of government that you can't control. You have very little say over. And some of you may have found yourself in an intimidating moment where you said, I don't want to upset this person because I don't want them to deny my permit, make things go a little harder for me, I have to hire a lawyer. You shouldn't feel that way in your country. This is America. You should feel like your government is answerable to you. And the best way to make sure that happens is you have a place like New Hampshire where you have control of your government. You're able to see your state elected officials, your governor. Our governor, Chris Sununu, is everywhere. You see him everywhere. You get to reach out and touch him. Your state senators, your state reps. When you elect one of these folks who go to Congress, you see them very infrequently. They go to Washington, they become members of the 535 Club, and they start to act like they own this country. That's wrong. I want to make sure that we shrink the role of the federal government so that you feel empowered. You know that this country belongs to you. The only way we do that is to make sure that we have people who are there for a limited time, and we turn these seats over. I think every single person, I encourage everyone to run for office, because I think at some point, the more people run for office, the more people involved in this process, the less likely we are to have conflict in our country, less likely we are to have corruption in our country, because everyone's involved. Right now, most people don't get involved in the government because you're sick of being lied to. That's why I think character and integrity is the most important quality in a public official. Because you and I can agree on every single policy. Maybe not. So we can agree on a great number of policies. But at the end of the day, if you can't trust the person you've elected, then why are you voting? You can't see that person. So you can't trust what you can't see. You can't change what you don't know. My job is to make sure the federal government doesn't interfere in New Hampshire's business. So that's why I believe in term limits.
Yes, sir.
My name is Dan Murray, I'm from Wolfboro.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering, do you support President Trump's initiatives and efforts as the president?
Let me tell you, I am certainly a supporter of the president. I've said this from back in 2016, during the presidential primaries. I was with Dr. Ben Carson initially. I was the state co-chair here. And after that, I started helping then candidate Donald Trump. Let me tell you why I have. Because what resonated with me was someone who said, America first. I believe in America. That's not an isolation statement. That doesn't mean that we're opposed to other countries. But you have to take a good look at what's going on at home. You have to take a look here. Our roads, our bridges are crumbling. Our people are in trouble here. We need resources here in this country. And so when the president, and you'll notice when the president talks about unity in this country, he talks about Americans, the American people. Every other politician, some Republicans, many Democrats, what do? They put us in buckets. They talk about African American candidates, African Americans, Hispanics, women, gay people, straight people. Everybody's in a bucket. And we cannot unify our country when we're divided that way. So I think, so when you look at what he's trying to accomplish, he won the election. It was a fair election. And if you can't respect the process, we won't have good luck in the future. We just won't. Because the folks who say that running on this resist movement, my opponent, again, this is where we differ. We weren't all happy when President Obama was the president of this country. We were not. But we didn't walk around saying, let's impeach him. Well, some people did. But we certainly didn't walk around with resist shirts on, trying to tear down neighborhoods, trying to tear down other people, because you have to respect the process. That's what this country is built upon. What happens to the next male or female president who's elected? If this becomes our manner of engaging one another, governance, what happens to the next president? We won't be able to govern. So if you're not happy with the results of it, then you have to vote. You have to get out and figure out a way to bring the country together. But at some point, I hope people take a deep breath and realize what's happening. We were just told in the last administration, 2% growth. We're experiencing 4% growth. People are working. For the first time that I can remember, folks who are working the holiday season right now are being offered vacation packages, retirement packages, incentives to come to work. So, you know, and I have to tell you this too, one of the most disappointing things you heard from a lot of folks on the left who said they care about economic empowerment. This is the best example because you saw it firsthand, you look it up for yourself if you didn't see it at the time. But during the State of the Union, when the president talked about record low unemployment for Black Americans and Latino Americans, you had a whole group of people who said they dedicated their lives to develop this economic empowerment for minorities. They sat down their hands and wouldn't clap for it. Would not stand and recognize. That tells you the division that's in our country. That started right after the election. So it's really unfair to put all of this responsibility on the president and say about the divisive nature of this country right now. When you can't get people to come together and recognize a great accomplishment on behalf of other Americans because somehow you think it gives them too much credit. I think we have to get back to a place where we respect the direction of our country. And that's why you see so many military veterans running now, Republicans and Democrats.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Jeff Jones from Radford. And
Sorry, could you just speak up and again, please, and just say that louder so
I'm
people.
Jeff Jones from Radford.
Thank you.
And a lot of what you're saying, especially in regard to the Social Security, harks to what I consider the biggest problem with Congress today, and I'm talking Democrats and Republicans. It's called congressional elitism. And the number one example of this is they can and do exempt themselves from any law that they pass that they don't feel like they should participate in, but it's good enough for everybody else. Well, how are they gonna get any kind of, believability from the constituents anywhere if they do things? What message does that send? The reason that Social Security is in such trouble is because they don't participate in it. If they participated in Social Security, it'd be fixed like that. And this is something a lot of other people don't know, but I'm going to tell you because it's shocking. Over the years, Congress has continually raided Social Security for billions of dollars for stupid projects like teaching elephants to detect bombs, crap like that. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating at all. They've done this, and it's because of a Supreme Court decision, Fleming versus Nestor, 1960. And that said that Social Security is not people's personal money, even though it's taken out of their accounts all their life. It is open for using for general fund, pork barrel, stupid purposes. So if
Sir,
Congress,
let me thank you for your comments. Do you have a question for Ed?
yeah, I would like to see somebody, anybody in Congress, and I haven't addressed this. I haven't seen the media address this. And to me, it all goes to this. So, would you, if you got elected to Congress, would you make this an issue? Would you bring this up? Would you oppose this congressional elitism?
Sure. And I say that because that's what I've been campaigning on since April 2017.
Yeah.
This is why, again, it goes back to the earlier question about term limits. This all stems from a group of people who think they're special. That's where it stems from. there's so much packed into what you just said about leaders in Washington. But the best example, with all due respect, one of the best examples is what we saw in 2017. The number of sexual scandals and harassments and things like that went on in Congress. We still don't know the names of everyone. Think about that. They said they were going to correct the system, they were going to hold people accountable. You haven't heard anything else about it. The media talked about it for a while. Other folks talked about it for a while. It all went away. But we spent nearly $17 million over a 20-year period addressing these type of issues. Now, when you confront an elected official, congressperson over this, they'll say, well, they weren't all sexual harassment issues. Some of them were other types of harassment issues. Some of them were other type of things we had to pay. Nonetheless, we want to know who it was. We want to know who these officials are. And to top that off, the salary for folks who are in Congress is $174,000 a year. We had one congressman say, I can't afford, he's not the only one who feels this way, but he was the only one who had the courage to say it. I can't afford my home back where I am with my wife and children, and I can't afford an apartment in Washington, D.C. at the same time. So I think we should have a $2,500 stipend. That's what's in these folks' minds. And again, that's why you see the citizens desiring honest, ethical people to run. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be honest. And think about how desperate we've become as a country. When we recognize we're not going to agree with everyone, but we just want somebody to be honest with us. And I think you'll get that from folks who are running in the military. I really do believe that. I'm not suggesting that everyone who served in the military or served in law enforcement are angels by any stretch. But I'm really telling you that folks who served in the military and served in law enforcement, they live under a code of ethics. And as a consequence, when you don't meet that code, there is no such code in Washington, D.C. It just doesn't exist. And it feels like in politics, the more you lie, the more you misrepresent things, the more you're rewarded in this business. I'm asking you to reject that. Reject that once. Let's figure out a way to bring our country together and make sure that folks in Washington, D.C. do not live above us. They live under the same laws we have, and you demand that. You have a chance to send a clear message to folks in this country what you expect. That's why these campaigns can't be won and lost based upon the amount of money you raised. What the poll numbers are telling you. This has to be about you saying, we're done. We're done. We're going to vote for people based upon the character of the person who's in front of us. Not someone who's wanted to be a career politician their entire life. You know, most of us have had to work 2 jobs. And we're proud of that. Oh, I was in the military, I worked 2 jobs. Now you're hearing people say that no one should have to work 2 jobs. You heard Bernie Sanders say that that's this progressive movement where people now are saying, I'm a socialist. People have to come out and say, oh, yeah, I'm a socialist. Because Bernie Sanders said no one should have to work 40 hours and still be poor. Well, if you started a business, you work more than 40 hours. If you're trying to take care of a family, you work more than 40 hours. But this is the nonsense they're trying to convince you. And where does it come from? We've changed our culture so much so that people can't imagine living in a time where we're not culturally dependent on government. I really want moms and dads to be back in charge. I want kids to grow up and be kids and not have this enormous pressure on them. I want our wisdom tree, our seniors, to start leading our communities again. Not government. Not someone you didn't elect, you have no control over, to tell you how to live.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I promise I won't be any more of a pontificator than this gentleman. First of all, I want to applaud you.
And your name, sir?
Mike Delaney, I'm from New Hampton.
Thank you.
I want to applaud you for not being a victim.
Thank you.
You and Dr. Ben Carson, and I've had garbage too. I imagine most people here have.
Absolutely.
All right, now I have a couple of issues. As far as health care is concerned, back in 2005, the House of the Congress passed and the Democrats filibustered tort reform. I have a copy of a report that was taken out of HHS.gov, where the head of Medicare and Medicaid and a guy from Stanford did a long and intensive study in heart disease within Medicare and Medicaid, and their conclusion was that the Fed would have saved $600 million in 1990. Nobody says a damn thing about it. I don't know if that would be something that you would be interested in following. Now, I do have, the other thing I want to say, another little tea leaf, is that this has to do with education. Now, Intel is working on a 10 nanometer chip. That's 10 nanometers apart for their diodes, not the diodes, the transistors. Taiwan Semiconductor is working on a 7 millimeter, and Intel started working on this in 2016. Point being that the intellectual curiosity in this country is going downstream. It's going downstream. Asian kids coming over here, they are laser focused on their studies. And I saw the president of San Diego State roll his eyes and shake his head and said, American kids have other interests. I don't know if you get to Congress, I'm hoping that you do, if you will take an active interest in the educational system, from K all the way up through graduate school. Because these kids are coming over here and they are not working in a McDonald's when they get back to whatever country. They are the ones that are now, when they get their PhDs, they're the professors of their universities, which are growing. All right? And intellectual curiosity is something that is going to rule the world. Now, I don't know if you believe that, but you think long and hard about that.
Sure.
I'd like to know what your position. Oh, one other question. All right. Now, everybody will be interested in this one. Okay? All right, so they're throwing out garbage at you. Did you accept it, or did you fight back? And did you say where the lies were to the press?
Oh, sure.
So you did.
Oh, yeah.
And did they report it?
Thank you, sir. We'll let Eddie answer your questions.
Thank you. A lot of what you're talking about is what we all care about, right? Culture. Because right now we're talking about a cultural dynamic. I agree with you. When you look at our young people, there's over 1 million children in this country, under 5, who take psychiatric medication. Think about that. Under 5 who are taking psychiatric medication. I'm not suggesting some don't need it. 5, under 5, we're putting the kids on psychiatric medication. 25%, nearly 25% of all children under 18 are taking some type of antidepressant, at least one pill. We're loading our children up. By the time, in America, by the time you reach the age of 18, you will have seen over 200,000 images of violence. 200,000 on television. Not in video games or the movies, just television. This is a cultural dynamic. That's why I keep saying that moms and dads have to be in charge so you can inspire and motivate our young people in our lives to become educated, to pursue higher education. Also, but to pursue their own talents and their creativity and ingenuity. Part of the problem we've had here is that we drugged our young people, we pumped them full of violence, and we've said to moms and dads, you can't be in charge. You can't determine what's the best interest for your young person in terms of their education. So you just saw Harvard. I think Harvard is being sued right now by Asian American children for being denied admittance to college, for whites, blacks, and Hispanic children. So if you start to see what happens in this country, this is why it's so very important that we put moms and dads and communities back in charge. If we start trying to figure out from a national level, the best thing I can do, I feel, as an elected official, is to make sure that we empower the states so you can take control of the states. If I start trying to go to Washington and figure out how Washington, D.C., the federal government can be involved in this mess, it's going to make it worse. I can think of very little that the federal government has decided to do to help states, help communities, that has not increased cost, taken away freedom, and prosperity. Very few things they've stuck their nose in. The state of New Hampshire, we have an interesting way of resolving our problems. And if we were allowed to retain more of our money and keep the federal government out of our business in many aspects, we could be a lot better. We would be a lot better off. We provided more options for our children. I had two daughters. I still have 2 daughters. One went to St. Thomas, and one went to a public school. So I wanted them to have the freedom of discretion to go to schools and their choice where they could be empowered. I think that's what we have to get back to. We have to make being creative what I mean in this space is how kids can learn. We don't all learn the same. We don't. There's some wonderful kids who are juniors and seniors in high school that we should be empowering to meet the workforce demands of the future. There are some kids who want to go to college. There's some kids who want to go to trade school. I was just one of our trade schools operating heavy equipment. And now, I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to operate heavy equipment, but it's somewhat challenging if you've never done it before. But the amount of opportunities for folks who are in the trades, plumbers, electricians, there's so many different things we can do. But we have to get back to a place where we're not dependent on government to lead the way. And I know it's hard for us to imagine this, because this is taking place over 60 years. Over 60 years. And the best example I like to use for this, again, because I like history and I like us to think about what's happening in our country over this time frame. If I said to you, who was the first female millionaire in this country?
Veterinarian, did you say?
Who was the first female millionaire in the United States of America?
Nancy Astor.
Who?
Nancy Astor.
Okay. Now, from what I understand, it was Madam C.J. Walker. Now, Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire in the early 1900s, like 1905. You know where she was born? 2 years after slavery. She was her father's and mother's 8th child, born 2 years after slavery. She became a millionaire in the United States of America when she couldn't even vote. How is that possible? When you live in a country where you believe in free enterprise, you believe in family and community. That's how things like that happen. Now we've gotten to a place in this country where we can't even imagine doing anything without government, particularly the federal government. Look at our community. This is what New Hampshire is all about. New Hampshire turns out to support their communities, their families, their neighbors. When you think about when you help your neighbor, or your neighbor helps you, it's not because government told them to. It's because you want to. We are a nation of decent people, caring people, forgiving people. Government causes the conflicts between us. Government does. So I agree with you 100%. This is a cultural issue, though. We have to change the direction of this country, how we think. If we can change the way our young people think, the way we think, our nation will certainly be back on track again, without question.
Yes.
Susan Gordon from Mulboro. I'm aware that you're pro-life. I was wondering what your stance is on the death penalty.
I support the death penalty.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I support the death penalty. I think, I know some people disagree with that, and I'm only one person, so in a nation like America, I'm just giving my honest opinion.
Right.
There's little I can do about it,
Okay.
but I'm supportive of the death penalty.
Yes, sir.
Position on the national debt.
I think this is a disgrace.
And what do you think you might be able to suggest regarding the alleviation of this debt?
Yeah, you know, we talk about this all the time, right? The debt, we've had plenty of conversations about, and this is what I mean by real politicians, traditional politicians. They'll talk to you ad nauseum about the debt, but nothing's ever gonna change until we change our mentality. This is what I'm telling you, we're the only country in the world, we're the only country that borrows money to give to other nations. Of course we have a debt problem. Why wouldn't we have a debt problem if we're doing business that way? And we're passing on debt to our great-grandchildren. You know, so we have to buckle down and start, and we're not gonna get out of this mess overnight. It's gonna take some tough decisions that leads us to a place where we can be a healthy nation again and not bear this kind of debt. But it's not gonna happen overnight. Because, here's why. Everyone wants something from the cookie jar. Everyone, right? So, who made the cookie jar? Who put the cookies in the jar? No one's worried about that. People are just like, hey, give me my cookie. And until we get back to a place where we're serious about this, and this is why I keep bringing this up. If you even look at the trade deals. So, when the president started talking about imposing tariffs, the president's a free trader. I'm a free trader. I think we all believe in the open market, free market. But look what happened. He put a little pressure on the EU. They turned around pretty quickly. Renegotiating the NAFTA. Okay, I think China will come around as well. Why? Because we can't have other nations dictating to America what is free trade, right? So we're all for open trade, but when you say to other nations, okay, let's get rid of all tariffs, they don't want to do that. Right now, you have New Hampshire companies that cannot sell their goods in other countries, but those countries can sell them to America. How's that fair at all? And so I think we have to stop trying to be the world's piggy bank, the world's police. There are a lot of things that we want to lead by example, just showing that we're a country that wants to lead by example. But we can't pay for everyone. We can't pay for everyone. And at the end of the day, I think we have to spend more time trying to work right here at home to bring our country back together. You know, when I think about this flag, we all stood up tonight and we said the pledge. And I keep going back to that because at some point, we have to say to ourselves, this is our greatest symbol of unity. When we pledge allegiance to our flag, we're pledging allegiance to each other, one another. We're saying, we're fellow citizens, I'm with you. That's what we're saying. But we can't get unity around our flag, our symbol of peace, prosperity, justice, and freedom for everyone. We can't all adhere to the Constitution. We got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. So it does have an impact on our debt because it's the way we think. You know, and as you said, that I didn't grow up considering myself a victim because of my grandmother. This is the power of family and community. If you have one person in your life, if you're a young person, you have one person in your life who says to you, I'm going to hold you accountable for everything you do.
As an extension of my question, would you advocate for a budget, passage of a budget at the federal level?
Of course, that's what they're supposed to be doing, passing a budget. That's what they're supposed to be doing, right? So of course I'm going to advocate for those things. We live pretty responsibly in our daily lives. I have a budget. My wife makes sure I have a budget. That's why she manages a CPA firm. So of course, we have to live within our budget. We have to live within our means. Our state tries to do that. Why? But again, you have to ask yourself though, why are we accepting this? Why are we accepting this? Why do we keep voting for the same people over and over again? We do. You know, I think this country would be better off if we said, hey, listen, if you've been in public office, I don't care what office you've been in for 4 to 6 years, we're not voting for you again. See what happens. Because let me say something, if you can't be effective in 6 years, you probably shouldn't be doing whatever you're doing. Because I can tell you what, if you went to work for any company, and you told that company, I gotta work here for 6 years before I can figure it out. Watch how long you stay. But people have actually told me that when I was talking about term limits. They've said, hey, listen, 6 years is just not enough time. I mean, you won't have any seniority, you won't know what, you know, you gotta figure out, have a little time to figure out what to do. Really? You want me to wait 6 years before I become effective? Come on, we can do better than that.
Yes, sir.
Just
mention
Mike Hatch, Meredith. A friend of mine ran for Congress and he made it, and he went down there for the training, and he came back and said, I spent 3 days learning how to be a congressman, and 2 weeks how to, raise money. And I can't expect you to go down there and change that. But that's one of the saddest facts. That's why they work, 3 days a week or whatever it is. And I don't, like I say, I wish there was a way you could change it, but.
Well, you can. And here's how you can change it. You can change by holding me accountable. If I'm fortunate enough to win this election, you can change it by holding me accountable. That's why I've said to people, I'm the only candidate who's been running, doing town halls. You have 4 elected delegates right now. 4 Democrat elected delegates. How many town halls between the 4 of them have they held? I think this is my 9th one.
Shaheen has never had a town hall.
Right. And I'm not even elected yet, hopefully. At some point I will be, but this year. But I'm on my 9th town hall. 4. You haven't heard from them. Why? This is risky. That's why people don't do town halls. If you're an elected official, the first thing your advisors tell you, stay away from that. Don't do that. You may say something that somebody may take a sound bite, twist your words, chop it up, and put it out there. Right. But only you can stop that. So that's, listen, I've been campaigning very hard for over since April 2017. Why? Because I believe the way you win elections, the way you empower people, is you go meet them and you look them in their eyes, and you tell them what you stand for. They tell you what they want. That's the best way to do it. And if you're doing that, you're gonna have all the money you need. Why? Because people will show back up to vote for you. People work hard for their money. They work hard for their money. So when someone gives you a $5 check or $10 check, that's a lot to a lot of people. It may not seem that way to people, but to me, this is a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden standing in front of you tonight. You took time out of your night. It's 7:15 tonight. You took time out of your night to come down here and listen. Those are not comfortable seats, I know that. That's why I'm not saying it. But you took time out of your night to come down here. And because you took time out of your night to come down here, it's a heavy burden to look in your face, look in your eyes, and then misrepresent myself to you, lie to you, get down to Washington and do something that I know you don't want me doing. That's why I've committed to doing town halls when I'm elected. This is how you get reelected. This is how people want to hear from you. But if I get elected, you never see me again until I need your vote again. I put up signs, I put out commercials. That's not what you want. Reject that. So someone who's just running TV ads or running radio ads, and you never get to see them, you never get to ask them questions in public, they won't answer your questions, why are you voting for that? Why would you vote for anyone who's afraid to come in before you and answer your questions?
Other questions? Yes, sir. Please identify, state your name and your...
John Habeisen from Moltenboro. I like what you said about term limits. I wonder if you're elected, if you have a plan of attack of how you would get that through the old timers in Congress.
Well, sure. I'm a Navy man. I always have a plan. The first thing you do, you have to go after the benefits, right? So, because that's just a law change. So that's just a law change, and I've committed to putting that in. Come hell or high water, we're putting in a bill that says that if you're a member of Congress and you're elected in 2018 with me, your benefits go away. Your retirement package goes away. There's no reason why anybody in Congress would have a better benefit package than the average citizen in this country. That has to go, number one. Number two, there are two congressmen, my understanding, have met with the president on term limits. Now, you're not gonna go to Washington, and I'm not gonna misrepresent or overstate this. You're not gonna go to Washington and tell people who've been there 30 years, hey, time's up, right? Then they're gonna go along with that. So you have to go there and say, okay, anybody elected in this class, 18, moving forward, we have term limits. Let's put a constitutional amendment in. I want those folks to go back to their district. I want Senator Shaheen, Senator Hassan, to come back here to New Hampshire and tell you why they won't go along with term limits for people elected after 2018. What justifies that? Some will tell you, because they want to keep running for office, well, the best way to institute term limits is at the ballot box. We don't vote people out. We don't. So, and they know that. They know they're not going to get voted out because they know they can use the power of the office to get reelected. So I think you go after the people who have been elected with this class. Because I think it's harder for that to make the argument that they wouldn't vote for it and wouldn't support it. This is something that you're starting to see emerge all over the country, particularly here in New Hampshire, but all over the country. People want power back in their communities and their families. They're sick of Washington, particularly federal office. I mean, just imagine that. Just think about that for one moment. I elect you. You go to Washington. You have better health care than I have. I elect you. You have a better retirement package than I have. I elect you. You make 4 times the average salary of the average person, average family in this state. Why am I voting for you again? We really should start holding these people accountable. We don't do it. We've had one, we've had two. Work their way up the food chain in this state. State rep, state senator, governor, U.S. Senate. I'm running against a guy who did the same thing. State rep, county treasurer, I believe, executive counselor, now want to be in Congress. Asked if what do you feel about term limits? I don't know, maybe. I've been on the ballot 18 times. Oh, no, I'm not really interested in term limits. But he won't say that. This is what I'm telling you, folks. We have a narrow window to change this. Right now, 52% of all children under 18 in this country now live in a household where at least one person in that household has a means-tested government program. That means that the majority of children in this country under 18 are growing up in a home where there's someone there receiving a government subsidy at some level. So the majority of our kids are gonna grow up believing that government is supposed to provide something. That's not the way this should work. That's not the way this should work.
Yes, sir, in the back.
Thank you for allowing me a second question. I have a follow-up on the deficit.
Sure.
So you said that you believe the deficit is caused by people having their hands in a cookie jar or providing foreign aid, or two examples you gave tonight. So this question is that, actually it's two-part. Do you agree with Mitch McConnell and the Republican leadership that has blamed the deficit on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and that the recent federal tax cut has no role in the deficit? Would you have voted for the tax cut knowing what its impact on the deficit would be?
Thank you for the question. No, thank you for the question. Two points. When I talked about the national deficit and debt that we're talking about, I'm talking about this in a broader sense. So I'm not just blaming foreign aid on that. The point I was making, we're borrowing money to give to other countries. Okay, that's completely, I think, asinine, to borrow money to give to other countries. Now, as far as your question goes, no, I don't think we're blaming the debt in this country on people who are paying into it. Medicare is a program where seniors are paid into that program. Social Security is a program that people paid into. The problem,
McConnell said today.
well, the problem, I haven't heard from Mr. McConnell. I don't have a relationship with Mr. McConnell, so I have no idea what you're talking about. But I can tell you that when you rob these programs of money and transfer it, like President Obama did with Medicare, when he took nearly $700 billion out of the program to establish the ACA. That's how these programs become insolvent, when you're taking people's money. You tell them it doesn't belong to them. That's what's happening. And so we have politicians trying to blame other folks for being responsible. They paid into those systems, now you're telling them that it's their fault. No, at the end of the day, this is why we need to get career politicians out of Washington. You're paying into a system. Our seniors paid in that system, and now they want to put everybody else on to Medicare. They want a Medicare for all program. That's absurd. How are you gonna pay for that? No one wants to tell you how you pay for that. We have the VA. The VA is the second largest federal agency. It only covers 7% of the population, less than 7% of the population. And so now you want to threaten seniors even more by putting people onto Medicare, a program they paid for. That's why even in Vermont, where Bernie Sanders is from, they rejected that program. But he's trying to push that program on the rest of the country. Colorado, they rejected that program. Even California rejected that program.
Other questions? Actually, the gentleman right back here, you haven't had a chance yet.
Tom Ingram, Holmesboro. You've had a lot of experience in a lot of different areas, being a police chief. What are some ideas you would have for combating the opioid crisis?
Sure.
Drugs?
Sure. Thank you for that question. In my background, I also was what was known as a DRE, which is a drug recognition expert, where I've trained other police officers on identifying 7 categories of drugs. And I can tell you, when we're going through that training program and training other officers, we saw this coming. About 10 years ago, we saw it coming when we were starting to arrest people, engage people who were taking prescription medications. And if you look at our crisis right now, the heroin issue, 75 to 80% of those folks, first-time heroin users this time around, started with prescription opiate. We're starting to realize some of the sales techniques that these pharmaceutical companies, salespeople use for doctors. They encourage a lot of this aggressive marketing. I'm sure some of you, when you went to the doctors, you probably experienced that your doctors were giving you, but they were giving you a lot of samples, right? So this was really being pushed. Now, my doctor has informed me, he and I had a conversation about this, they can actually test if you're taking your medication regularly or not, just through your urine. You can tell how often you're taking your medication, if you're taking it or not. My wife had surgery not too long ago. They gave her a 30-day supply of opiates. She took them for 1 day, maybe a day and a half, and went to ibuprofen and Tylenol, right? So there are many different ways that we can prevent this from coming about. If you look at there's a leading fire chief here, Pete Barney, in the state, who has a wonderful program to reduce addiction to opiates when people are car crashes and stuff like this. So there's a lot of talented stuff going on, a lot of innovative stuff going on to reduce the use of opiates. But I really think when some of these people have become addicted to opiates, this is a lifelong battle at that point for them. Lifelong battle. Every day is 1 day at a time. So who's going to pay for that? Taxpayers right now. Taxpayers foot their bill for that. To me, I think you have to go back to pharmaceutical companies and say to them, you have to pay for this. You have to pay for this. You and I are picking up the tab for that. While some of these pharmaceutical companies are spending about $24 billion in advertisement and promoting drugs, and as I said to you earlier about our young people, some of these young people are growing up in the country, never experiencing life without the benefit of medication. So we're drugging our population, we're aggressively drugging them in some cases, and I think you have to go back to the pharmaceutical companies. They took a medical health problem and turned it into a criminal justice problem. So there are a lot of things we can do to educate our population. And first, I do think it starts with education. You have to educate doctors, pharmaceutical companies on what's going to be tolerated and what's going to not be tolerated, but also parents and young people. I don't think sometimes parents are really told what the medicine their child is taking, what it will do to them. I think because you trust the doctor, and the doctor trusts the pharmaceutical sales rep to some level. I can tell you when I went through the DRE program, a lot of doctors weren't unaware of how some of these drugs actually affect the body. And believe it or not, that training program teaches you a lot about how drugs affect the body and what drugs do. So we've seen these things firsthand. So I think we have to have a funding for this. It's going to be a burden for the taxpayers. I don't think that's fair. I think the burden should be back where it started from. And you see in some cases, some of the companies that actually started this problem now have come out with medicine to counteract it. So they get paid twice. All right, so we have to be really serious about what we're trying to do.
Well, folks, we've rapidly moved towards that 7:30 time. We're not quite there yet. We have time for one more question. So here's your last chance. Yes. Anna.
Hi, Holly Tager. I'm from right here in Meredith, and maybe Usama.
Oh, well, thank you.
Congratulations.
In light of that fact, back at the tail end of Bill Clinton's administration, in the middle of the night by the wave of a pen, he changed the terminology from POW-MIA to duty status whereabouts unknown because it was more media friendly. In actuality, what he did was he changed the status of a soldier, of a sailor, of an airman. Should they be captured, they don't get considered prisoners of war because they could possibly be AWOL. They took away the urgency, this took away the urgency to their situation and the danger to their situation. It also took away any security to the family left back home, holding the pieces together. Namely, that wife and 3 children living on military housing, waiting for him to come home. Because he could possibly be AWOL. She no longer gets his paycheck. And she has 24 hours to vacate the premises and the government doesn't care where she goes.
Do you have a question for Ted?
Yes, I do. As a veteran, what would you do? Because you see, in September of 2016, I faced then candidate Trump and challenged him to be the candidate to right this wrong and change that terminology back to POW-MIA. So as a representative of New Hampshire and the hub of all POW awareness, because the first POW vigil anywhere happened right here in Meredith, what will you do to make the president aware that that Blue Star mother from Belknap County that challenged him is still watching and still waiting, because he hasn't done anything yet?
Sure. First of all, God bless you and your family for what you give to this nation. You raised a patriot, and I honor that. And I think our country honors that. And I think we have to get back to a place, as I said earlier when I started this tonight, where we would actually respect our military. There's only 1.3 million of them. And I think we have to do what we need to respect and honor that. And I'm not fully aware of the document you said that President Bill Clinton signed. But I can tell you that I think it's important that we have broader discussions about this, open discussions about how we treat our military. Because I think it's one thing to just say, thank you for your service and provide lip service. There's another thing to actually mean it. So I think we have to get back to a place where we're having these discussions, because New Hampshire has the largest veteran population, one of the largest veteran populations per capita. 10% of our population are veterans here. We care about veterans in this state. And to your question, if I'm elected, I'm sure I'm gonna have plenty of conversations with the president about our veterans, plenty of those. And I can tell you, I don't mind having a broader conversation at a national level about some of the issues you just brought up. But right now, I'm just not fully aware of all the issues that you just brought up. But I'll be happy to look into those.
Would you be willing to sit down with, say, Bob Jones and myself?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for being here this evening. As it's been pointed out, Eddie is the Republican candidate for Congress in the 1st District. If you enjoy and liked what you hear from Eddie, I'm hoping that we can count on your vote for Eddie on November the 6th. And if you really like what you heard tonight, the common sense, the integrity, the message from Eddie here, please share that with your friends and your neighbors, because what's most important is to get out the vote, and whoever gets the most votes wins. We need all those people who are supporting Eddie to actually go to the polls on November 6th, and if you aren't going to be able to make it, ask for an absentee ballot at your town clerk, and you can fill out an absentee ballot if you're not going to be there on election day or unable to get to the polls that day. So I'd like to thank you all for being here this evening. And